Within recent months, Trinidad and Tobago has experienced two crises. First, there was the drop in global energy prices. Then, the global pandemic, COVID-19. Our government has been praised for taking quick action to help stop the spread of COVID-19, with the closing of borders, businesses and schools, implementing health measures based on international recommendations, and urging individuals to stay safe at home and take precautions while in public spaces. Our numbers stabilized, and the 6-phase recovery plan is well underway. As we move forward, we take a moment to look back, behind the scenes of the Roadmap to Recovery Committee announced on April 16th and chaired by the Prime Minister, Dr. the Honourable Keith Rowley.
We have to anticipate, as we expect, that all of us will be here when we come to a point saying that the worst is behind us. We have to determine what level of risk we are prepared to take. So the team that we put together to prepare a roadmap to recovery, as Prime Minister, I will chair this group. The group will contain 2 other government ministers, Minister Robert Lee Hunt, very experienced person. He will be the vice chair alongside a co-chair, Mr. Jerry Brooks. And it will also include to do some accountant, secretarial work for the groups, Minister Alison West in the Ministry of Finance, who would come to the government from the private sector. It will include Mr. Wendell Motley, economist and former Minister of Finance, Mr. Robert Bermudez, one of our frontline businessmen who chairs the board of one of our largest conglomerates, Ms. Karen Darbesi for banking, Mr. Winston Dukaran, economist and former Minister of Finance and central banker, Mr. Christian Mute, a businessman largely in retail and services, Mr. Colin Supinchow, expert in accounts and finance, Mr. Sean Roach, a medium-sized businessman in the manufacturing sector, Mr. Ronnie Mohammed, businessman in his private business and chairman of Caribbean Airline in public business, in the food production business, Mr. Vincent Pereira, a businessman in the energy sector and chairman of the country's largest bank, Mr. Vishnu Dan Paul, our most experienced permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Alison Lewis, a former PS in the Ministry of Finance, very experienced in public business and public financing, Mr. Gregory Maguire, an economist from UWI, Professor Carl Theodore, economist and specialist in health economics, who heads a team of younger experts in this same field, Dr. Selwyn Hazel, an economist from Tobago, Mr. Christopher Henry, a Labour representative from JTOM, Mr. Michael Anisette, representing Natuk, Labour, Mr. Alan Warner, a businessman, experienced businessman from Tobago, and Mr. Rondell Fields, representing the public interest. All those persons will come together to work alongside other aspects of the government effort. But their assignment, as they break themselves out into smaller specialist groups and working together under the chairmanship and guidance of the Prime Minister, who will receive their recommendations and work with them in crafting those recommendations. And we will pick up from them in the end a roadmap for Trinidad and Tobago post-COVID.
Co-Vice Chair Jerry Brooks gave some insight into the work of the committee.
The committees were actually selected by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. What happened is that we had the upsurge of the virus which began to accelerate in the March period. The pandemic has two elements to it. There's a health element to it, and as well there's an economic element to it. This is the first virus where not a single shot has been fired, and you have over 300,000 deaths. And where it continues, it is not a single event, it is a continuing series of events which we must manage for. And so the Prime Minister, in his wisdom, would have selected a 22-person committee very early in March, around March the 16th or the 17th. He convened his first meeting, and the purpose of the committee was to do a number of things. One, it was to ensure that we protect the economy. Two, having protected the economy, that we jumpstart the economy, we accelerate and reignite growth. And thirdly, and most importantly, that we reimagine our society. Not to return to where we were before the pandemic, but to use the pandemic as an opportunity to ensure that we're able to accelerate our growth. We're able to digitize the economy, to create e-identities, and to give and to ensure that the country is on a better footing. Our first job is to ensure we protect and save lives, and from an economic standpoint, we protect the livelihood of people by taking a look at specific sectors and ensuring that each sector we understand its vulnerability, we sustain and we try to maintain employment, driving that. We drive aggregate demand so that we improve aggregate demand, and that we ensure that supply chains are there to support aggregate demand, to support employment, and to protect workers across our country, Trinidad and Tobago.
At the first meeting of the Roadmap to Recovery Committee, Professor Carl Theodore presented the work of his team, which included graduates from the Center for Health Economics at the Faculty of Social Sciences, Department of Economics at the University of the West Indies. They ran economic models to develop the foundation for the work of the recovery team.
And we focus on GDP, although we know a number of other areas are going to be hit, and hit very badly. We focus on GDP because that is the damage which will in fact also will help us to understand where the other damage is going to be, whether it's employment or price level or whatever, the balance of payments. There are a number of other areas, but we focus on the GDP.
This economy has been hit very hard before, but it has come back. So the point I'm making here is that as bad as COVID thinks it is, it certainly doesn't mean the end of the road for us as an economy. It doesn't mean that at all. I think what our long-term picture tells us is that we have a way. If we do what we need to do properly, we have a way of getting it. I think there are two dimensions or two aspects of the planning challenge when we face the city. The first dimension, the first aspect is that we have to make sure that we do the things that would not make the economy fall as far as the COVID is pushing it. That is the first thing. So in other words, we have to mitigate what is the immediate effects of the COVID. Something has to be put in place to do that. But the next thing, obviously, is that since the COVID will be putting us in such a deep hole, we have to work out on how we're getting back out of that hole. And I think my sense is that the job of this committee is really that second job, how to get us out of the hole.
Professor Theodore painted a clear picture of the challenges which lie ahead and the need for every individual in every sector to adapt to the world's new reality. A clarion call echoed by the Prime Minister as he addressed the committee members.
The solution to post-COVID-19 must lie in rebuilding our productive sector, creating employment, boosting productivity in manufacturing, trade, and the services sector, improving revenue collection, and reducing unsustainable expenditure. The solution cannot be an unsustainable welfare state. These are the challenges that have brought us here today, and these are the challenges we have to tackle and untangle, so that among these options, so that our choices can be determined and recommended for the road ahead. And let me say finally, as I take my seat, that let us give the country the comfort in knowing that those of you who are gathered here and the many persons and agencies that you will consult with, you will be doing so not as a lobbyist of your private interests or your personal expectation, but you will be doing so as a representative of the only hope of all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because by now, we are sure that wherever you've come from, wherever you've been, you would agree that at this time, in this situation, we are all in this together. It's either we swim together or we sink together. This is Trinidad and Tobago. If it burns down, we all will live in the ashes.
This was a production of the Ministry of Communications.